see, I flew into Chicago last Friday, and I used my miles, my American airline miles, and funny enough, for the flight from Chicago to LA, they upgraded me to first, but from, yeah, that's super nice, I felt like a prince. But from Zurich to LA, it was to Chicago, it was actually a horrible flight because I was routing through London, and arriving in Chicago, I had the most horrible time getting through the immigration, you know, because all the automatic machines were down and they were doing things by hand. And while queuing for the immigration, I had a bad idea and made a big mistake. I figured, okay, I pamper myself and I take the Go Airport Express taxi instead of taking the train, okay, which you would usually do, especially when you have a European background where you use public transport. Okay, so I took the Go Airport Express, and I sat in this Go Airport Express for like a felt eternity. In fact, it was only 3 hours. I was actually the last one getting into this bus, and I was the last one getting out of the bus. And I have seen all the hotels that exist in Chicago downtown. Okay, so that was a big mistake. But you know, I have the privilege of being 50 plus these days. So I have 52 years now, and I always say, when you're 50 plus, you have done so many mistakes in your life, adding one more doesn't really matter. And the longer the more, this actually becomes the motto of my life, and I realize, besides losing hair and physical strength, there are some advantages of getting older. You're losing kind of all fears. You're losing the fear of being socially not acceptable by the way you dress or by doing crazy things. You know? So, like, some of you know that I started making perfumes that end up on a shelf in a perfumery or in a bookstore 11 years ago. And since then, I really added a chain of failures and mistakes in this venture. For instance, one of the bigger mistakes that almost killed me and my brand at the very early baby state was shortly after I introduced what has become the classic in my line, Air du Désert Marocain, or like you say, what do you say? LDDM. LDDM, okay. Because I introduced this scent with the idea that this is going to be kind of the masculine equivalent of Le Maroc pour Elle, which was the first fragrance that I made for a little bookstore in Zurich that nobody knew and nobody knew me and everything. So anyhow, so it was supposed to be the male butch Maroc thing, okay? And what you do when you produce a fragrance that is supposed to speak to men, you make the bottle big, you make it bulky. So I produced a 100 ml bulky bottle. Okay? And I priced the scent, I think back then it was for 100 ml, $69. Okay.
Can we still get
I know, right?
Because back then, you know, it really was like, I mean, it was a hobby. I had to fix a price, so $69. And then something amazing happened. People started to really buy this fragrance in the bookstore, which is really, if you start thinking about it, it's like mind-blowing. So you have this really ugly bottle. It was really ugly, and it was sitting in, you know, in a really the cheapest cardboard box that you can imagine, that we fold ourselves, sitting on a cheap inlay that we kind of folded ourselves. and with cheap labels that I printed on my HP printer myself. So, but we started selling, and the longer the more, also internationally, and I realized, and I talked with Antonio about that, I realized, okay, what is going to happen if I continue selling and even sell more? I realized this is going to kill me. Because, you know, producing 5 liters or 10 liters or producing 20 liters is a big difference, you know. 10 liters you can lift and 20 liters are already pretty heavy. And that's the difference between making 15 ml and 100 ml. And then I also realized that actually $69 is just nothing. I mean, and we're not talking about this line here, okay, which is $63. Maybe in 10 years you will see me here again giving a speech and tell you how stupid I was. So, bye now.
People's eyes light up when they see it.
Right. So anyhow, so that was actually pre-Facebook. Okay. Imagine. I mean, it's like, ooh. You realize how old you get when you start talking about the time before the social media. But actually, the internet back then was already quite social. You know, there were blogs, and people connected through blogs and forum like Makeup Alley. What was your Perfume of Life? And Base Notes still exist. Okay, I think I have to stop the first story. So anyhow, so back then the internet was already quite social, and I made the announcement that from one day to the other, you know, that I reduced the volume from 100 ml to 50 ml, that I keep the prices up or at the same level, or I go 10% up. Basically, I doubled the price, okay, from one day to the other, which was for a lot of people really a shock. But what was amazing, and I got a lot of the negative side of the social media, you know, like in an English that I could not even answer because most of the terms I didn't really got. So, but because I was out there in the blogs, and I had my own blog back then already, I learned something that was really truly amazing. There were a lot of people who started defending me, you know, and I was very, you know, open about it. I told everybody, listen, I mean, I made a mistake and I made my pricing wrong and I can't do this 100 ml, forget it. We are about to sell more than 100 bottles per year. We are approaching 200 bottles per year or something like that. And those people started to really defend me and say, no, Andy is right and he has to do it. And that was one of the best experiences I had on the internet. That besides this dark side that there is, you know, there's also this very positive thing that people kind of support small ventures like mine. Okay.
A lot of customers have told me that they became fans of yours partly, obviously, because they love the fragrance, but also because of your transparency in social media.
Yeah.
Just talking about why you made that change and that transition.
Right, and you know, I mean, okay. Absolutely right. I mean, changes. I mean, since I started, like, I kind of reinvented myself in a certain way, like 5 times or 3 times, or at least on a multiple basis. And that's what you have to do these days, because the internet hasn't slowed us down. Neither me nor you, okay? Everything is, seriously, everything is changing, and nothing that was true 5 years ago is still true. You cannot, if you run a business, for instance, you cannot operate the same way you did 5 years ago, because we are not talking about pre-Facebook, we are talking about in Facebook now, okay? And the name of the game has changed, and you have to change too, and you have to reinvent yourself and everything. So for instance, me, the US was the biggest market before this big thing happened, the financial crisis. Okay. I was actually very lucky. Because I traveled to the US like once every half a year, towards 2007, I had this gut feeling that something is really wrong, that an economy cannot consist of people selling houses to each other and buying goods from China. So I figured that it's time to buy put options on the stock market, on the Dow Jones, which my partner found really the most nasty thing to do, because you basically take advantage of the stock market collapsing. And maybe he was right, but you know, I mean, you make mistakes. And this particular mistake didn't make me rich, but it gave me, you know, some money to survive what followed, because what followed was a crash. And I can tell you, there were weeks where, like, you were sitting on the computer and just nothing happened, no order, zero. And not for one day, for multiple days, for weeks. And you go, Jesus, what is going to happen now? I mean, everything is kind of like falling apart. And so what I had to do then is basically, I had to find a new way to do my business. And that was to go through something that I found is actually like hell for a small brand, like a one-man show like Andy Tauer, and I'm still more or less a one-man show. I had to go through distribution, meaning you have these greedy distributors and the super greedy agents and the perfumeries, and all of them want their share, okay? And you end up with, for a bottle maybe that costs in the store like $100, you end up with $7.50 or $10. And imagine if you're a one-man show and you realize, okay, the US market is dying or it's not there anymore, and you see, okay, hey, there's a potential in Italy. We can sell hundreds or thousands of bottles in Italy, but we have to go through this distribution thing. It's really kind of a big step. And I was very, very lucky that I really found a really super Italian distributor who helped me to go through these steps, which means building up huge inventory, working on communication and everything. So back then I really had to reinvent the brand again, and I think I still do it, which is in a certain way very rewarding, because so what I like to do is, besides sitting on the balcony and watching the tomatoes grow, which I really love to do. I really love to create perfumes, okay? But here's the spoiler, okay? Every time or most of the time when I get contacted by press people, for instance, or people who want to become a perfumer, or who want to work in a perfumer's lab to learn all the tricks, they think that I'm spending most of the time of my day behind some flasks, maybe in the cellar, you know, working on it, doing all this magic thing, which actually it is a magic thing, you know. I'm putting things together, I put it into a bottle, I can sell it for $130, and people are getting very excited about it. This is magic. But and yeah, I forgot to mention this at the very beginning, you know, these 3 hours in this taxi, go Chicago Airport Express. I used these 3 hours to build this speech, okay? But I could not give the speech in Chicago because they were more oriented towards selling. So I did not get a slot, but Antonio was so nice, and so for the next 2.5 hours.
Go for it.
Okay, no, so but bottom line is, being a perfumer and running a brand doesn't mean that you make perfumes all the time. Actually, I very rarely make a perfume or create a perfume, you know. It's something that happens maybe in the evening, maybe once a week, you know. And you know why? Because I write down every formula in my Excel. You know? Sometimes it's, like I mentioned, for the Rose Flash, it's just one try and it's done, which is a perfumer's paradise. Usually it's a lot of trials, but at the end the perfume is finished, and then it sits there as a formula in the Excel. And if I look into my Excel, I have more than 10 perfumes that are ready to be launched. So, and then Antonia can tell you, if I'm launching 10 perfumes in the next 2 years, either me or she will go bankrupt. So you can't really bring all the perfumes to the market. You know, it's sad. But I guess in a lot of other industries it's exactly the same. Like if you're doing music, you can bring a new album maybe in spring and one in autumn, but if you bring one every month, nobody will buy it because it's just too much. Okay, so what do I do? So 50% at least, maybe 60, sometimes 70%. I sit behind my computer and I do nothing else than answering emails. And write to my suppliers, send invoices, send reminders for invoices and double reminders and triple reminders and worry about stock levels. Because for instance these days, before I left Zurich, it was really super stressful because somewhere in April I realized, Jesus, there's going to be the holidays. Like in, we have April and by September the stock needs to be there for Christmas. So in April you see this perfumer brand guy really trying to build up stock and making orders, and you know, and I'm not the only one. Everybody orders in April. So actually, this business side is really super important and super demanding, and I actually like that, you know, and I like these crisis moments when you think, oh, everything gets very shaky, like we have an earthquake here, and you don't know what's going to happen next. But it's always a chance to kind of get better and reinvent yourself. And maybe one last word. When the music side of it goes with the speech, yeah, it's kind of, it fits. Okay. Let's hope that he gave up.
Right?
No, so one last thing. So I mentioned it, I come to the US quite regularly, which is nice because I can combine my private pleasures of visiting cities and the desert and relaxing there, and the company pays. But there are other reasons why I like to come to the US and where I really love to talk to my US clients and be here at events like Tigerlily or Lucky Scent or Twisted Lily or all the lilies that there are. You know, I think in US culture you really allow people to fail, to make mistakes, and to say, oops, mistake, I fell on my nose, and you allow them to start again. They have maybe a bloody nose, but you don't worry too much about it. From a Europe perspective, this is so refreshing, because in Europe we don't really have this failing culture. You have to do it right, okay? And if you fail, you're silent. So I would never give a talk like that. And maybe we have to talk about whether you're going to publish this. Anyhow, so it's really fun being here for me. I hope you're gonna have a great time, and I would really like to thank Antonia again for setting this all up. Cheers to you, Antonia.
Thank you so much, Andy, for being here. We totally appreciate it. Yeah, as you can tell, everyone was very excited.
Yeah, me too.
And thanks for talking too.
Yeah, it was fun.
My pleasure.
Being so honest.